Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. The laugh tore through the darkened hallways of the Newman medical sect like a cutter through silk, raw, hopeless, and soaked in terror. "Mama, save me!" Matt's voice echoed as conditions bit into his wrists and ankles, his body arching in violent spasms while admonitions squalled and nurses rushed in fear. But what truly shattered the room was the way Jack Abbott sat in the doorway, his breath catching in his throat as if the air itself had turned to glass. Because standing beside Matt's sanitarium bed, her face half hidden in shadow yet unmistakably familiar, was a woman Jack had spent decades trying to forget, a woman whose veritably actuality had been buried beneath falsehoods, blood, and treason. Evelyn Moore, the same woman who had formerly destroyed his family, manipulated his father, framed his mama, and dissolved after a reproach so dark it nearly brought Jabot to its knees. And now then she was stepping forward with cold, steady eyes as Matt thrashed and blubbed. "Mama, please, they're trying to kill me." Her hand resting on his forepart with a tender-heartedness that felt grotesque given the storm of secrets swirling around her. While Jack's heart pounded so violently he stressed the observers would pick up his own impending collapse, because the consummation hit him like a freight train. Matt wasn't just a perturbed youthful man with dangerous tendencies, he was Evelyn's son, the product of a crooked history Jack had tried to abolish, and worse, he was connected to every shadowy disaster that had visited Genoa City for months, from commercial sabotage to mysterious deaths and rumored blackmail schemes, all tracing back to a single name that formerly held power over Jack's entire world. Evelyn. Jack eventually rumored, his voice cracking, the sound of it transferring a sharp spark of recognition through her icy countenance, her lips entwining into a slow, unsettling smile as she turned to face him. "Jack Abbott, still pretending you don't know how deep the spoilage goes," she replied, her voice smooth but poisonous, while Matt pulled between them, his eyes zipping back and forth like a trapped beast seeing the approach of bloodsuckers. "Tell him, Mom, tell him what they did to us." And Jack staggered back a step, recollection submerging his mind, late-night phone calls, forged documents, the way Evelyn formerly rumored pledges of fidelity while still dismembering everything he loved, how she dissolved the night a crucial substantiation was boggled, leaving behind only ashes and unanswered questions. And now she was then again, not as a ghost of the history but as the intimidating mastermind of the present, her son unraveling under the weight of whatever crime she had entangled him in, yet still adhering to her as his only source of safety. "You should thank me, Jack," Evelyn said vocally, brushing Matt's hair as he quivered. "I raised him to survive in a world that chews up the weak, unlike the Abbott heritage erected on visions," her eyes narrowing, but indeed the strongest cracks when they realized the verity. And suddenly the observers spiked as Matt screamed again, his body agitating. "They know, Mom. They know what we did to Phyllis, to Kyle, to the Newman lines," his words vocalized into heartbreaks before the nurses fitted a opiate, the room falling into a suffocating silence as Jack felt the blood drain from his face, the counter-accusations of Matt's broken concession slamming into him like a stranding ball. Phyllis's mysterious poisoning, Kyle's near-fatal accident, the classified Newman documents blurted to the press. It was all connected, all orchestrated, and the architect stood right in front of him wearing the face of a mama guarding her child. "You've crossed every line," Jack said hoarsely, stepping near despite the earthquake in his hands. "You used your own son as an armament." But Evelyn only laughed vocally, the sound nipping. "No, Jack, I used him as a guard. And now you'll cover him too," her aspect stropping. "Because if the verity comes out about what happened all those times ago, about what you helped me bury, your precious conglomerate will burn alongside mine." The trouble hanging heavy in the air as Jack's once sins clawed their way back to the face, the secret deal he made to save his family's character, the substantiation he destroyed, and the substantiation he induced to vanish, all of it now a ticking time lemon wrapped in Evelyn's calm, merciless smile. "You suppose Genoa City will forgive you?" she whispered, leaning in so only he could hear. "For letting an innocent man die in my place." Jack's knees nearly buckled as the weight of her words crushed his casket, the memory of that night flashing before him, the rain, the enchantresses, the man's alarmed eyes as Jack turned down, and suddenly Matt stirred again, mumbling through the anodynes, "Mama, don't let them take me, I'll tell them everything." And Evelyn's grip tensed ever so slightly, her eyes darkening with an intensity that transferred a shiver through Jack's spine. Because he knew that look, the look of someone willing to do anything to keep their secrets buried, indeed if it meant silencing her own son. "Security will companion you out, Jack," Evelyn said easily, masking the trouble beneath politeness. Family matters. But Jack didn't move, his aspect locked on Matt's pale, pulsing face, the broken youthful man trapped between a manipulative mama and a megacity full of adversaries. This ends now, Jack said forcefully, summoning every ounce of resoluteness he'd left. Matt deserves the verity, not your falsehoods. And for the first time, Evelyn's smile faltered, just for a split second, before hardening into a commodity far more dangerous. Be careful, Jack, she advised. Because when the verity comes out, it doesn't just destroy villains. It destroys icons too. And as she turned back to Matt, brooding soothing falsehoods into his observance, Jack backed down sluggishly, his mind racing, his heart pounding, knowing the storm about to erupt would expose not just Evelyn's crimes, but his own buried sins as well, a reckoning that would tear through Genoa City like campfire, because Matt's alarmed cry, "Mama, save me," wasn't just a plea for protection. It was the spark that would enkindle the darkest secrets of the history. And this time, no bone would escape the deers. The silence that followed Jack Abbott's retreat from the hospital room felt heavier than the screams that came before it, as if Genoa City itself was holding its breath, bracing for the explosion of secrets that had been set in motion by a single desperate cry. Save me. A cry that now echoed through Jack's mind like a relentless drumbeat, because he knew Evelyn Moore's return was not just a haunting of the past but the ignition of a war that would rip through families, businesses, and lives with surgical cruelty. And as Jack stumbled into the cold night air outside Newman Memorial, his hands shaking, his thoughts spiraled back to the buried horrors of 2 decades ago, when Evelyn was more than just a corporate predator. She was a master manipulator who had seduced trust, twisted loyalties, and orchestrated the downfall of anyone who stood in her way, including the man who died in her place, the man whose name Jack had erased from the records to protect his family's empire. A decision that now clawed at his conscience like a living, breathing monster, because Evelyn wasn't just back. She was armed with leverage and worse, she had a son unstable enough to unravel everything with a single confession. Inside the hospital room, Matt's breathing slowed under the sedatives, but his mind remained a battlefield, flashes of dark memories colliding with twisted loyalty as Evelyn sat beside him, her fingers tracing slow, calming circles on his arm, whispering reassurances that felt more like commands. "You're safe, Matthew. No one can hurt you while I'm here." Though the truth was far more sinister because the danger surrounding Matt wasn't just external, it lived inside him, born from years of psychological conditioning, secrets soaked in blood, and a mother who taught him that survival meant silence at any cost. And as the door clicked shut behind Jack, Evelyn's eyes hardened, her voice dropping into a low, venomous murmur. "You were careless, my son," her tone sharp enough to cut. "Names, details, emotions make people talk." And Matt's eyes fluttered open, glassy with fear. "I didn't mean to, Mom." "I thought Jack already knew." His voice cracking as tears slid down his temples, and Evelyn leaned closer, her lips brushing his ear. "He knows only what I allow him to know," her words chilling, "and what he fears to remember." While across town, Jack sat alone in the Abbott mansion's study, surrounded by the ghosts of his family's legacy, gripping a glass of whiskey he couldn't bring himself to drink. His reflection in the window revealing a man older than his years, burdened by the knowledge that the woman he once helped erase was now back with a vengeance, and she wasn't just threatening his business, she was threatening his soul. Every scandal of the past year suddenly fit into a terrifying pattern. The sabotage at Jabot, the mysterious investor pulling strings from the shadows, the blackmail notes slipped under his office door, and the untraceable accounts funneling money through offshore channels, all bearing the signature of Evelyn Moore's ruthless brilliance. And worse, Matt had been her invisible soldier, executing her plans with a mix of devotion and desperation, the son who would do anything to protect the only parent who ever made him feel safe, even if it meant destroying lives in the process. The next morning, Genoa City awoke to chaos as rumors of Matt's hospitalization spread, whispers of a breakdown, a dangerous confession, and a mysterious woman at his bedside igniting speculation across the city. And when Phyllis Summers stormed into Jack's office, demanding answers, her eyes blazing with suspicion, Jack could only offer half-truths, because the full story would shatter not just Phyllis, but everyone who trusted him. "You're hiding something," Phyllis snapped, her voice trembling with unresolved fury over the recent threats against her life. "And it's connected to Matt." Jack exhaled slowly, choosing his words like stepping through a minefield. "Some ghosts should stay buried, But Phyllis wasn't the type to accept silence, and her investigation quickly led her to an old, sealed court record. One that bore Evelyn Moore's name and a suspiciously altered outcome, triggering a chain reaction of revelations that threatened to expose Jack's darkest compromise. Meanwhile, Evelyn tightened her grip, moving Matt into a private recovery facility under a false name, surrounding him with hired security and loyal operatives who answered only to her, constructing a fortress of secrecy around her most valuable asset, because Matt wasn't just her son. He was her insurance policy, the living proof of what she could destroy if her enemies pushed too hard. And when Victor Newman caught wind of Evelyn's reappearance, his response was swift and merciless, launching a covert investigation that peeled back layers of her global influence, uncovering a web of shell companies, political bribes, and criminal ties stretching from Genoa City to Europe, all leading back to the same woman who once vanished without a trace. And when Victor confronted Jack with the evidence, his voice thundered with fury. "You let this woman disappear, and now she's poisoning this city." Jack's silence was more damning than any confession, because Victor knew that silence meant guilt, and guilt meant leverage. As pressure mounted, Matt's mental state deteriorated, haunted by guilt, paranoia, and the growing fear that his mother would silence him the way she silenced others. His nightmares filled with blood-soaked corridors and faceless victims, whispering his name, and during one particularly violent episode, he screamed again, "Mom, don't let them take me." But this time the words weren't a plea, they were an accusation, and Evelyn felt it, the shift in his loyalty, the cracks forming in her control, forcing her to make a decision she had avoided for years. If Matt became a liability, she would have to choose between love and survival. The tension reached a boiling point when Phyllis obtained a copy of the destroyed evidence Jack once buried. A security recording from the night an innocent man died to protect Evelyn, a recording that proved Jack had intervened to alter the investigation, and as she confronted him in the Abbott living room, her voice shaking with rage and disbelief, "You let a man die to protect a monster." Jack's defenses crumbled, his confession pouring out in a torrent of regret. "I thought I was protecting my family." But Phyllis saw only betrayal, storming out with the evidence in her hand, determined to expose the truth to the world. Sensing the noose tightening, Evelyn initiated her final move, orchestrating a dramatic escape for Matt, faking a medical transfer while secretly moving him to a remote location. But Matt, driven by terror and a growing sense of guilt, left behind a digital confession, a message scheduled to send to multiple recipients across Genoa City, detailing every crime, every manipulation, and every secret his mother had buried, including Jack's involvement. And when Evelyn discovered the file, her fury erupted like a volcanic blast, her maternal mask shattering as she confronted her son. "You would destroy me?" Her voice shaking with rage, and Matt, trembling but resolute, whispered, "You destroyed me first," a statement that cut deeper than any blade. The final act unfolded in a secluded estate on the outskirts of the city, where Jack, Victor, Phyllis, and a small team of investigators closed in on Evelyn's operation, the storm clouds above mirroring the chaos below. And as sirens wailed in the distance, Evelyn stood in the grand hall with Matt at her side, her eyes blazing with defiance. "They will never understand us," she said, gripping his arm, but Matt stepped away, his voice steady for the first time in his life. "They don't have to. I just need the truth to live." And as he activated the confession file on his phone, Evelyn lunged, a scream of rage tearing from her throat, but it was too late. The truth had already begun to spread like wildfire, exposing decades of corruption, betrayal, and bloodshed. And in that moment, Jack realized the real terror wasn't Evelyn's power or Matt's instability, or even his own past sins. It was the unstoppable force of truth, because once unleashed, it spared no one, not villains, not heroes, and not the families who built their empires on secrets that were never meant to survive the light. The storm over Genoa City raged with unnatural fury as the truth finally detonated, thunder cracking like the shattering of every lie Evelyn Moore had ever told. The digital confession Matt released spreading through phones, newsrooms, and corporate offices like wildfire, exposing a legacy of manipulation, corruption, and blood that no amount of money could erase. And inside the grand estate where it all unraveled, Evelyn stood frozen in disbelief, her once untouchable composure collapsing under the weight of betrayal, her own son staring at her with haunted eyes that no longer saw a protector, only the architect of his suffering. "You taught me to survive," Matt whispered, rain streaking across the tall windows behind him like tears from the sky. But you never taught me how to live. And for the first time in decades, Evelyn Moore had no answer, her power stripped away by the very weapon she had forged, because the truth, raw, uncontrollable and merciless, had finally escaped her grasp. While outside, sirens wailed and the echoes of Genoa City's reckoning grew louder by the second. Jack Abbott arrived moments later, his face pale, his eyes heavy with guilt, not as a titan of industry but as a man confronting the consequences of his darkest compromise. And when his gaze met Matt's, he saw not a criminal, not a pawn, but a broken soul shaped by secrets that should have never existed. I helped create this nightmare, Jack admitted, his voice cracking. And I won't run from it anymore. His words carrying the weight of a confession that would destroy his legacy but perhaps save what remained of his conscience. And as Victor Newman stepped through the doorway, his presence commanding yet somber, even the mighty patriarch understood that no empire stood above the truth. Power built on lies always collapses, Victor said quietly, his eyes never leaving Evelyn, who now looked like a ghost of the woman who once ruled from the shadows. The final blow came when the authorities stormed in, evidence in hand, arrest warrants ready, the walls of Evelyn's carefully constructed world crumbling in a single, deafening moment. And as the officers moved toward her, she turned to Matt one last time, her voice trembling with something dangerously close to genuine emotion. I did everything for you. But Matt shook his head slowly, tears mixing with rain on his face. You did everything for yourself, a truth sharper than any blade. And as Evelyn was led away in handcuffs, her empire of fear and control dissolved into nothing more than a headline. A cautionary tale whispered across Genoa City. In the aftermath, the city struggled to heal, reputations shattered, alliances broken, and long-buried sins brought into the unforgiving light, while Jack faced the consequences of his past, stepping down from his throne to confront the man he had once betrayed, offering not excuses but accountability. And though forgiveness was uncertain, redemption finally felt possible because for the first time the truth was no longer hidden, and across town, Matt entered a long road of recovery, no longer a weapon, no longer a shield, but a young man learning what it meant to exist without fear, his nightmares slowly giving way to something unfamiliar, hope. The echoes of his desperate cry, save me, still lingered in the halls of memory, but now they no longer symbolized control, they symbolized survival. The moment a broken soul chose truth over terror. And as the storm clouds over Genoa City finally parted, revealing a fragile, uncertain dawn, one thing became painfully clear. Secrets can shape lives, lies can build empires, but only the truth can set anyone free, and this time, it came at a cost no one would ever forget.